We're proud to welcome you to the Exceptional Advisor podcast series brought to you by the Investments and Wealth Institute. The goal of this series is to help you better serve your clients, differentiate yourself from the competition, and enhance your ability to communicate those differences. This episode is brought to you by the Investment and Wealth Institute's Women in Wealth program, which aims to empower women in the financial sector and help advance professional capabilities of women in the industry. Learn more about Women in Wealth, upcoming events, and how you can get involved by visiting iwicentral.org/women in wealth. Today, my guest is Stacy Bernstein, CIMC, Head of Financial Intermediaries and Strategic Development at American Century Investments. Stacy, among other things, is a featured speaker in the September 22nd Women in Wealth webinar, Long-Term Implications of COVID-19. So welcome to the podcast, Stacy.
Thank you, Bob.
Pleasure to have you. Before we get started, for the benefit of our listeners who may not be familiar with you and your work, do you mind giving us an overview?
Absolutely not. So I've been in the industry for the better part of 25 years. I spent 10 years at Legg Mason running the national account team there, and then transitioned to American Century about 8 years ago, where I run our financial intermediaries channel. I am delighted to be a part of IWI, and I hold my designation, and am super excited to be part of an upcoming Women in Wealth webcast on September 22nd.
Great. So one of the things that we're going to talk about is scholarships. And earlier this year, the Institute unveiled a new scholarship fund designed to help address diversity and inclusion gaps within the financial service industry by offsetting the costs of the Institute's advanced certifications. And scholarships available include the Women in Wealth Scholarship, the Diversity Inclusion Scholarship for members of the LGBTQ community, disabled individuals, and minorities, and the RIA Center for Excellence Scholarship for Registered Investment Advisors. And these scholarships can be used toward the CMID designation, the CPWA designation, and the RMA designation. And so speaking of scholarships, Stacy, you being in the asset management industry, do you participate in any industry scholarship programs?
I do, but let me just say it's so great to hear about the scholarships that IWI is offering. I should have mentioned this into my introduction, but I lead our remote Accelerate chapter, which is our women's BRG group, and am extremely passionate about advancing women in asset management. So it's so great to hear what you all are doing. And yes, we support several different kinds of scholarships. And in fact, we were very excited just to find out that one of our employees' daughters was granted a NICSA Blackwell Scholarship.
NICSA, can you talk a little bit about that? What is that?
Sure. So NICSA is a not-for-profit trade association that strives to connect all facets of the global asset management industry in order to really develop, share, implement, and advance leading best practices. They are also super committed to promoting a diverse and inclusive asset management industry with the founding of the NICSA Diversity Project North America, of which American Century is a founding member, along with about 18 other firms.
So tell us a little bit more about the scholarship.
So the scholarship is awarded to dependents of employees who work for member organizations of NICSA. The scholarship award ranges from $3,000 to $5,000 and is renewable for the next 3 years as long as the recipient continues to meet the GPA requirement and remains enrolled full-time. So one of our employees' daughters, her name is Olivia, enrolled, and the process really was around submitting an essay about her plans for college and a potential career. The administrator from our high school also submitted a recommendation, and then she was interviewed by a NICSA member around her goals and how she plans to achieve them. So it was a pretty all-encompassing process.
Right. So I'm sure there were a lot of qualified candidates, given what I know about NICSA. What do you think made Olivia stand out?
Exactly, Bob. I think there were a ton of very qualified candidates. I mean, as with most things like this, interview was probably a very key component. And my understanding is that Olivia mastered the virtual interview, and she was a natural.
So what kind of reaction did you have internally to Olivia winning the scholarship?
So, I mean, as you can imagine, for her, it certainly helps ease the financial worries that everyone has associated with college. And she's extremely grateful for the resources. And really, this will alleviate a lot of worry and help her become the best version of herself there.
So that's great to hear. Let me shift gears for a little bit. You mentioned that Olivia mastered the virtual interview. Anything we can learn from that?
It's a great question. I think for someone who is, just graduated high school and it probably isn't used to interviewing, I think, and I don't know Olivia, but my assumption is that she practiced and she was comfortable and she knew what she was going to say. And I think she really, my imagination is I'm sure she role played around that with her mom, who happens to be part of our client marketing organization. So it was very adept, I think, at probably helping her.
Right. So in terms of American Century, how are you handling training employees at the moment with respect to the skills and knowledge that they might need in this new world environment?
So virtually, we have really committed to doing a lot of WebEx trainings. I think, as you can imagine, I'm part of the distribution organization. So transitioning to engaging virtually is, or was and still is now, a super important component of what we do. So we spent a lot of time training people on WebEx, around, first off, how to use the technology. And we were super tribal about everybody being very knowledgeable about using the technology, how to share presentations, how to share slides, where you should position your desk, the lighting, what you should wear in a WebEx. I mean, everything that would go into a training around a presentation, but now virtually. And I think one of the things that makes this time period so unique is that we have insight into really everyone's home for the most part, or their home offices, and in some cases their kitchens or whatnot. So communicating virtually, obviously you need to be as professional as you can, but with that said, we're all sort of bringing our authentic selves to work these days. And it is what it is. I mean, I think you probably could just hear my dog barking in the background. So we are trying to have our employees be as professional as possible, but with that said, we're all dealing with different components of life during this very unprecedented time period here.
Yeah, it's hard enough to support employees during normal times. I'm curious if you could share some more examples about how American Century is supporting employees during these unprecedented times in terms of maybe their mental and physical well-being.
So we've spent a lot of time and energy, as I'm sure a lot of companies out there have, trying to support our employees' mental and physical well-being. This is an extremely, and has been an extremely stressful time. And COVID, while it's been so devastating in so many ways, has really pushed us to adapt as an organization. And a big part of that was trying to put people at ease with all of the unknown. So we committed to a semester approach to enable people to plan and give them advance notice around reentry and expectations. But essentially, we just didn't want people to be more stressed out than they already are, just given these extenuating circumstances that we're all living through, and we're living as we go. I mean, there's no script around this thing at all, as you know.
There is no script. So I'm curious about the semester approach. Can you elaborate on that?
Sure. So what we're trying to do is communicate in 15-week increments. And as I said before, it's really around alleviating surprise. We don't want people to be caught off guard. As we head back into school now, there are so many unknowns facing all of us. And they continue to be unknown. And so we're doing our very best to provide as much support as we can. And one of the things we're doing is we're really trying to be intentional around flexibility, especially for parents and other caregivers. It's so critical right now. I can tell you, I'm very lucky. I have 3 kids that are back in school, but I am 100% the anomaly. Everyone I know, for the most part, either they have their kids in the office or bedroom, or in some cases the dining room table next to them, and they're trying to work and they're trying to homeschool, or there's some hybrid approach and it's hard to keep track with the calendar or who's going where. It's just, we are just trying to give our employees as much comfort as possible in a period of the unknown. And so that's why we implemented this semester approach.
Right. It's a great approach. Were there some guiding principles that became your North Star as you incorporated this semester approach?
Yeah, I think for us, communication, communication, and more communication. At the very beginning of COVID, we had daily touch bases just to make sure people were okay and how they were feeling. For me, my team, essentially, most of my people were remote, but I had a good portion of people that weren't remote, and they were used to going to an office every day. And now all of a sudden their worlds have turned upside down. They have kids, dogs, spouses, and everybody's in the same boat. So we really were just trying to provide sort of emotional support. And we did that through communication and having just conversations about life. It wasn't really all personal, professional and work related. It was really like, how are you doing and what do you need? Our CEO, Down, has been amazing throughout this whole thing. Normally in a business year that is pre-COVID or pre-pandemic, we'd have 2 town halls a year, maybe 3. Now we have a town hall about every 6 weeks, just providing updates, being transparent. We are trying to do speaker series that incorporates health and wellness into the workplace. We just did a meditation workshop a couple of weeks ago. We're going to do a chair yoga workshop. So again, it's communication, but sometimes it's conventional communication and sometimes it's not. So yeah, and we're also trying to do fun virtual connections that I can speak to if you'd like.
Well, I think one of the things that we had chatted about was this notion of guessing what's in someone's refrigerator. Is that part of the
Yeah. So at the beginning of COVID, you know, like many firms and like many people, we started the Zoom happy hour or the virtual happy hour. And, you know, at the beginning, it gave us a great opportunity to meet our employees' spouses, their kids, their pets. I mean, we were essentially in everyone's house. It was very strange, but I think on some level, we've gotten to know each other better, and I'll speak to the client impact of that also. And so the beginning happy hours were around, you know, what Netflix show are you watching? And then it sort of turned competitive. So every other week, we used to do them every week, but now with the summer and back to school, they've been spaced out a little bit. But we've had a lot of fun with it. So one of the weeks was you had to guess whose refrigerator it was, and everyone submitted a picture of the refrigerator. And it was very funny to see, you know, whose refrigerator was whose. Mine was an easy giveaway because I had a nice buttery, or 5 bottles of nice buttery Chardonnay in there, which happens to be my favorite. We did one with guess whose baby picture, and they provided their COVID tagline. So we've been trying to have as much fun as possible in these extraordinary times, in all honesty. And again, for me, one of the silver linings is it's been great to meet people's families.
Yeah.
The other guiding principle, Bob, which I think is really important, and I just want to make sure we talk about, is leading with compassion and kindness. That, at the beginning of this, were really the first words out of our CEO's mouth. This is all about compassion and being kind, because you just don't know what people are going through. And it was really scary at the beginning. It's still scary, but at the beginning, we were all on lockdown. We didn't know what was going on. Every other day, there was different news and media, mask, no mask, and just being kind and compassionate is so important, especially like I mentioned, everyone's bringing their authentic self to work, and some days are better than others. It's not easy. So just being empathetic, I think, is so critical, and our leadership team has really embraced and led with that. And that, I think, has made everyone feel good, at least about work and where they're at.
Yeah. Any other silver linings that you can think of? It seems like there are many. As I think about this notion of we went from being close to people in a workspace to now being even closer, but through distance.
It's weird. I know it is. For me personally, a silver lining has been just the change in pace. I'm someone who was always traveling at least 2 or 3 days a week. And on the weekends, as I mentioned, I have 3 boys. And so it was running from sport tournament to sport tournament. And my husband and I were always going in different directions, as I'm sure most people that listen to this can relate. And I'm sure you can relate. I think everyone can relate. So it's been really nice not running around, and it's been nice having family dinners and being at home and, doing TikTok videos with the kids, which, we never would have done. I didn't even know what TikTok was before this whole thing started. So just the quality family time, I think we'll all look back. I hope we all look back and see that was probably one of the biggest silver linings out of this whole thing. On a professional front for American Century and from our point of view, I would say one of the brightest silver linings was around work from home. And we recognized early that it works. And I would say we were a culture, like many, that thrived on people coming to the office and thrived on that office collaboration. And it was important for us to have people in the office. And this was an experiment I'm sure most companies would not have taken. But for us, I think we have far surpassed anything that we would have ever realized. We had the technology, we had the infrastructure and the commitment of everybody, and it works, and it really works. And so I think as a result, now we're recognizing work is never going to be the same, and there are millions of articles out there on that. So I'm not saying anything that's revolutionary by any means. But I will say we were in a leadership meeting this week, and it dawns on people and we were talking about reentry and what that looks like and everything that everybody's talking about. And, I think it dawned on all of us that it'd be impossible to draw on past experiences like we're so used to as we think about a post-COVID work environment. There was a recognition, and I think the aha moment, that the future holds a very fundamentally different way that we can work and that we will work.
It seems like other people and firms that I've spoken with talk about the notion of, in the post-COVID environment, the ability to work from home, maybe part-time, and work in the office part-time may become a thing, a standard practice in the future. I'm not sure if that'll be the case at American Century or not, but.
Yeah, and I mean, we are very actively working on this. And in fact, we started working on this as soon as, or right thereafter, after COVID hit, and that we saw that working from home worked, and that, how do we create a more modern work environment? And so we incepted this concept of the connected workplace, which I can talk about. But as I said before, we've had members across the organization and across the world really working on how do we develop a consistent and effective approach for us to implement this concept of connected workplace.
Okay. So obviously the Institute has 13,000 members who are investment advisors, investment consultants, money managers. Any tips on how an advisory practice can learn from this?
So, I mean, I think there's so much that's just transferable, like sort of regardless of where you work. Embrace video conferencing, embrace connecting virtually. Needless to say, it's much easier to do that when you have the relationships than when you don't have the relationships. But I would say get as comfortable as you can with video conferencing. And I think one of the benefits for advisors, and I had this own experience with my family, we were trying to set up a meeting. My brother lives in Raleigh, North Carolina, and he's got small children. And we've been trying to set up a meeting with my parents' financial advisor and their attorney. And we just had challenges because we were trying to do it in person. And we were able to do a family meeting with our parents' attorney and financial advisor after months of trying virtually. And I would imagine that many of the advisors on this call have been able to get those family meetings scheduled, or meetings that were super hard to schedule because you were trying to coordinate a lot of people traveling or coming in. Now all that can be done virtually, and I think people are comfortable with getting on Zoom or whatever technology medium. So I would embrace that as an advisor, the ease of being able to get people together faster. I can tell you with our clients, we haven't missed a beat with meetings. And in fact, we've probably had more meetings. We've gotten in front of more heads of research that typically are super hard to get in front of. We've been able to have our portfolio management team get in front of heads of research. We launched a brand shortly before COVID started, and we haven't missed a beat. And so I do think one of the benefits is the ease of being able to schedule meetings. And as I said earlier, it's been really interesting, not only on the employee front to see an intimate look into their homes and lives, but we're seeing that with our clients too, which is super interesting. And I think in a weird way, to your earlier point, has helped to accelerate those relationships. Never did I think I'd see, I'd be in the president of some major broker-dealer's dining room, but I have been. So it creates a different dynamic, I think. So I don't know if that answers your question, but
No,
I
it
think
does.
there's
It
so
does.
much that's transferable.
And it's interesting. I'll just share a personal anecdote, which is I have an estate planning attorney who typically insists that my wife and I meet with him in person in his office. And in the COVID in the COVID pandemic era, we can't go to his office. So now it's much more convenient to meet with him by virtual meeting when I know that my wife and I can be together instead of driving somewhere to go meet him.
Yep.
So it works.
Yep.
So what
Yep.
do you think, how does all this translate in the post-COVID world, and what do you think will be sticky and what won't stick?
Again, I don't know that I'm going to say anything revolutionary here that people haven't read. I don't think you're going to see huge meetings. I don't we've all attended conferences with thousands of people. I think that is going to change, at least for the near term. I think in-person meetings will come back at some point once there's a vaccine. But I think they'll be smaller and more intimate. Again, not revolutionary. I think travel, even for myself, I would get on a plane and go have lunch and come home, and is that really the most effective use of my time and of the client? Maybe, but I think we're going to just naturally rethink how we engage with clients. And when we think about travel, is it essential travel? I mean, can you do the meeting with not being there? And I think in some cases there will be travel that will be essential, but I think we'll all sort of rethink, do I really need to get on that plane, or do I really need to go there? Obviously, there's been a lot of discussion around this, but just physical interaction in space, and I think people will be cautious about close contact. I happen to be a hugger and a kisser, and I think that will change, or at least they'll virtually be able to do that, or at a distance do that. So I think that will obviously change. And then, as I mentioned before, really what I think is so changing for everybody is this new paradigm and a modern way to think about how a company should look and operate, regardless if you're in your home or if you're in an office. As we thought about sort of the future of work from home, it was always grounded in the fact that we're still first and foremost able to deliver superior results for our clients. And so maybe if that didn't happen during COVID, we'd think differently. But productivity is up, efficiency is up. And so with that, we at American Century are really committed to institutionalizing the flexibility that came with COVID in a post-COVID world.
So what does that institutionalizing flexibility look like?
As I said before, we spent a lot of time working on this, and we call this the connected workplace. So I can go into sort of the concept of the connected workplace. And that, again, as I said, it's just, a recognition that we're productive and effectively serving our clients from different locations around the world. Really, it's also intended, and this is what I love. This is what I love because I know it helped me. I was always sort of a connected employee. I've had the great fortune of being able to work from home, and that allows a different level of flexibility. And with that said, I think companies are realizing employees, are giving more to their companies than they've ever given before. And I think, I can tell you from my past experience, I've loved having the flexibility, and I'll give everything I can to the company that allows me to do that. I think for us also, this connected workplace has enabled us to broaden our reach, and I think that it will serve as a competitive advantage. We believe that we'll be able to attract talent, including more diverse candidates, which is super important to us. We'll be able to retain talent and ultimately build a more resilient organization. And at the end of the day, all those reasons are good, are super important, but they're also super good for our clients. And this really all starts with the client first, because that's what we're tasked to do, is delivering superior outcomes for our clients. Mm-hmm. You mentioned this earlier, and I didn't elaborate on it, but I think it's an important point that, for us and the way we're thinking about the connected workplace, it will look different for everyone, but we're trying to simplify it. So the way we've been thinking about it is those that will be in the office less than 60% of the time, and those that will be in the office more than 60% of the time. And so that's more or less 3 days a week. If you commit to being 3 days a week in an office versus less than 3 days a week in our office. Right. And, our approach will be to support each group, obviously.
Right. So you mentioned that I think when COVID began in March that you had to pivot fast. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, I think everybody pivoted super fast. I think employees, for us, the date was, I think it was March 11th. That March 11th, people were in the office, and at 5 o'clock, people were told, you're not going back into any of our offices. And like many firms, we have offices around the world. So we did pivot, and really, ultimately, it was to protect the health and safety of our teams. But a more permanent shift, there's a lot of considerations to that. So again, as I said, we have a whole army of people working on what a new connected workplace looks like. And there's just a lot of implications from taxes, compliance, country and state regulations. How do we support people from a technology standpoint? And then most importantly, and I think everyone is learning as they go, but how do you foster and maintain the culture that you built in a pre-COVID world?
Right.
So I would just close by just saying that our goal is to be consistent in the application across our employee base, but nimble enough to adjust to the needs of each department. So for instance, what investment management decides to do will be different from ops, and obviously ops will be different from legal, and legal will be different than sales. So we want to have consistency, but it's hard to apply a sort of one-size-fits-all approach also.
Yeah. So do you think there will be different types of support that will be provided in this work from home construct?
I do. We're starting with the belief that most roles can be done successfully working remotely, as we've seen. And right now, like many firms, we have provided our employees with the technology that they've needed, but we're still thinking through sort of, if you elect to permanently be work from home, like what does that technology bundle look like? Will there be furniture allowances? Again, we're working through all of that. We want to make sure we support our employees in their office space, and they've got ergonomic support. So we're essentially, Bob, thinking through everything.
Right. So, I think we had chatted before we recorded this that you're seeing a rise in back and neck claims in the work from home environment. How is American Century handling that?
It's interesting, and it's probably of no surprise that we're seeing that. So we are emphasizing the ergonomic. And as I said earlier, we've got a big emphasis on wellness in the work from home environment, and the mental health and the physical health piece. And I think all of us have felt that at times we're living at work, and that's not a good feeling. I know there are days that I sit in my chair from 8 to 6 o'clock staring at a screen, and it's super hard. So we also want to make sure that our employees, if they do elect to work from home, have a dedicated workspace that allows them to walk away from work. I think that balance of work life is now more critical than ever.
Yeah, I find myself taking more mental health breaks during the day than I perhaps ever did, and going for a
Yeah.
short or medium term or long walk just to, clear the head.
Yeah,
So,
me too. I try to exercise in the morning, and then I find myself taking a lot more wine drinks at night than I probably normally ever would have done either. So it's a balance for sure.
it is a balance. So I know American Century is part of a strong culture, as are many advisors that are listening in. So how do you continue to foster that culture in a more permanent work from home construct?
Yeah, so I mean, I wouldn't claim they were experts at this. I don't know that anyone is experts at this, but I mean, what we think is that ultimately it's going to require a commitment from all of us to invest in relationships, which I know advisors that's a natural for them, but just making sure that we're so committed in doing that, that we're supporting each other. Again, it goes back to being empathetic. And that we're mindful of the culture that we built, and that we're continuing to build on that culture. We've got some great support groups like via Microsoft Teams. In fact, one was just launched for parents of pets. So, again, we're trying to be creative and support that culture. We've got an ACI Peloton team so we can work out together. So, it's town halls, it's creating technology platforms, it's all of it. And obviously in a post-COVID world, we'll still be able to go back to an office and have meetings. And so I think all of that will continue to contribute to the strong culture that we've built over the years.
Mm. Anything that we haven't touched upon that you'd like to mention, or anything that we've talked about that you'd like to reemphasize?
I just think the biggest and most important point here is just be kind. In a world that is upside down for most of us, it's so important to be kind. This school thing is really hard. Again, as I am waiting for the phone call that it's going to flip on its head and my kids won't be in school. But everyone I know that has small children, we're going through a hard time, but we're resilient, and hopefully will make us better, and be kind. Those are my sort of parting words here.
All right. Well, Stacy, I want to thank you for joining us here on the Investments in Wealth Institute Exceptional Advisor podcast. It's been a pleasure chatting with you.
Thank you, Bob. Same here, and I look forward to speaking to everyone on the 22nd.
Great. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Exceptional Advisor podcast series. My guest today was Stacy Bernstein, CIMC, Head of Financial Intermediaries and Strategic Development at American Century Investments. This episode is brought to you by the Investments and Wealth Institute's Women in Wealth program. Don't miss the upcoming Women in Wealth webinar, September 22nd, 11:30 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time, where Stacy will be a featured speaker. Learn more about Women in Wealth, upcoming events, and how you can get involved by visiting iwicentral.org/Women in Wealth. Stay up to date and have the latest episodes of the Exceptional Advisor podcast delivered straight to you by subscribing through iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you've enjoyed this podcast, then don't miss our Exceptional Advisor webinar series hosted by Tony Davidow, available at investmentsinwealth.org. The Institute stands ready to help you as you navigate these turbulent times with new resources, research, programs, accommodations for candidates and certificates. For more details on resources available, visit www.investmentsinwealth.org.